bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con Easy Bank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca.
Prestare il proprio tempo per il bene comune è un valore prezioso che va sostenuto e tutelato. Da sempre, vicini a enti religiosi e non profit. Contatta subito i nostri agenti.
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con Easy Bank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca.
Prestare il proprio tempo per il bene comune è un valore prezioso che va sostenuto e tutelato. Da sempre, vicini a enti religiosi e non profit. Contatta subito i nostri agenti.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo
Proporre con la propria vita.
esiste anche grazie a te.
Buongiorno.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting with the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola. Dear President, I would like to greet you wholeheartedly, and I welcome you on behalf of all the friends of the Rimini meeting. I would like to thank all the authorities present here, especially the members of the European Parliament who are with us today. You, dear President, preside over the most representative institution of the European Union, which is composed of 720 members of the European Parliament directly elected by the citizens of the 27 member states. In recent years, the European Union has faced challenges and problems that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago. A war on Europe's doorstep, an increasingly conflictual geopolitical situation, an international market characterized by new protectionism, and above all, by increasingly powerful and invasive technological oligarchies, and last but not least, an increasingly fragmented and polarized civil society. Faced with this situation, the debates in Parliament reveal approaches, sensibilities that are partly convergent but sometimes sort of distant from one another, and especially some even far removed from the founding values of the European Union itself. Undoubtedly, the Union needs significant reforms to streamline decision-making processes, strengthen the Union's position in the new geopolitical context, make its economy more competitive, and simplify the procedures of an overly invasive and often stifling bureaucracy. Europe is our common home. This is the only big home in which we have the respect for human rights, the state of law, democracy, and universal welfare coincide. Unfortunately, however, this house is showing some cracks, and this requires us to consolidate its foundation, that is to say, freedom experienced as shared responsibility, both socially and politically. Only in this way can unity in diversity avoid turning into standardization or disintegration. Dear President, we are well aware of your commitment to building a union rooted in its own tradition and, by virtue of this rootedness, capable of facing this historic moment with courage and with vision. In his famous declaration of the 9th of May 1950, Robert Schuman stated, and I quote, "Europe will not be made all at once or according to a single plan. Europe will be built through concrete achievements which first create a de facto solidarity." End of quote. Today, we find ourselves in a new, difficult, and particularly challenging phase of this construction, which urgently requires the addition of new bricks, to borrow the title of our meeting. And precisely because of this, thank you very much, dear President, for sharing with us your vision, with your authoritativeness, and with your long experience within the European institutions, sharing with us your vision of this construction today. Thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for welcoming me to the Rimini meeting. It's an honor and at the same time a great responsibility to share with you our reflections, the reflection we carry out in Europe. Thank you very much, dear Bernhard Scholz, for your kind invitation and for the warm welcome. And thanks also to the volunteers whom I met this morning. And thanks to the members of the civil society that made all of this possible. I'd like to start by saying that Europe is what we, all of us actually, have the courage of making possible. It's not finite, it's not complete. However, the destiny of this single project depends on all of us, on each and any one of us. This is my appeal to you. Let us fight for Europe. We cannot afford to give up. Let us never underestimate what we can become. We are still at the very inception of our project. If the world has changed, that's true. The United States has become more complicated than it used to be in the past. The war in the Ukraine, however, also highlighted our reliance on Russia. And the terrible conflict in Gaza showed to a new generation how strong the need is for a stronger Europe that is capable of promoting peace. And yes, as Mario Draghi said, the economic strength is Europe's soft power, and Europe's soft power are no longer enough to make sure that Europe remains a global player. So status quo would mean giving up, leaving Europe at the borders, at the sides. Europe has never been a spectator in the world, and we should never get used to being such. We are leaders. We just need to be brave enough to make the right decisions. The time has come to stop looking at Europe as is. The time has come to start building Europe and turn it into what it can be and what it can become. Europe has only two options. First, brave change, or second, the slow and painful spiral towards becoming irrelevant. I am in favor of change. The European Parliament is in favor of change. We all know that change is not easy. Change means sacrifice. So we have to ask ourselves difficult, thorny questions. Do we want to place ourselves in a position to defend ourselves? Do we really want to integrate our markets and unlock the great potential we know? Do we really want to support our businesses and our businessmen? Do we want to ensure our model based on free enterprise, entrepreneurship, and social networks? Actually, my Europe to all of this, dear friends, is one and only one: Europe. The Europe that can be, and now the time has come to build it. What Bernhard has just said is true. The European Union has faced challenges that only some years ago would have been unthinkable. These challenges are real. And recent years have shown that if we are to give the right answers to the world where we live, Europe has to change. If we are not leaders, we will end up being followers. Europe has to become quicker, leaner, fairer, more capable of producing tangible results for the people. Europe has to learn how to best use the tools it has at its disposal, and has to be brave enough to create new tools when it doesn't have them. This means recognizing that the status quo with which we have all felt comfortable, that enabled changes for a whole generation, is not enough, is no longer enough. Courage is a difficult word in politics. Sometimes it seems that everybody is in favor of change, but actually only few are really willing to change. In recent years, the European Parliament has been radically transformed. We have learned that if our institutions are too short-sighted, or if they are too comfortable, or if bureaucracy makes them too heavy so that they cannot adapt, well, then citizens will lose trust in Europe's ability to keep its promises. My dear friend David Sassoli had warned us on this, even here at the Rimini meeting. By their very nature, Europeans are builders and innovators, as well as innovators and inventors and businessmen. We want excellence, we aspire to excellence, and this has made this part of the world the protagonist of global progress and industrial revolutions. So we made art, nurtured culture, built businesses, and made it possible for generations to move from poverty and war to prosperity and peace. And very few countries know this better than Italy. Yesterday morning, I was in Calabria, in a small village in Calabria, and I met Nicola, a young businessman. What Nicola wants from Europe is that we make his life a bit less complicated, so that his small business can thrive in his beautiful land. Nicola is not asking too much, and that is why my message to you is a message of optimism and hope. It's a message of trust in our ability of being up to this historical moment. Europe was not created to be a mere spectator. This is not in her nature. It's not in her nature to become such. The first step we need to make to lay the foundations for this is to create the conditions for a stable and sustainable growth by simplifying the rules, reinforcing the single market, and reinforcing trade. And I can assure you the European Parliament is doing its best to making the best and necessary decisions so that Europe can go on. A few months ago, President Mattarella, on the occasion of his visit to the European Parliament, defined our Parliament as the center of gravity connecting institutions and citizens, bringing them together. And this is a responsibility which we take very seriously. As regards our agenda of simplification, which is the very core of our commitment to make a better functioning Europe for its citizens, we are progressing there too. In Italy and in Europe, there are lots of innovators, there's lots of creativity and talent. I visited many places of technological excellence, the supercomputers Leonardo, for example, which are among the most powerful in Europe. It's based in Bologna, that's capable of processing enormous quantities of data and supporting research and innovation. But we also know that a passing 13,000 pieces of legislation in the past legislature against the 3,000 in the United States would be a break for anyone to progress towards the future. And all of us, and we were there, all of us, I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be frank. We have to understand where we were too hasty and where we have not proceeded too far. This awareness is what should guide our way of governing today. Passing pieces of legislation is our daily work, mine and the work of my colleagues in our common home in Europe. And this is the approach that led to the compromise on the file on packaging, also thanks to the contribution of the Italian industrial sector and the efforts of the Italian MEPs. Massimiliano Savini is one of them, and he served as a protagonist in this. Some colleagues are also present in the room, and I'd like to greet them all. Bernhard, Picerno, Carlo Fidanza, Giorgio Gori, thanks a lot for being here. Thanks for inviting me. Finally, I'm here. All this work has enabled us to postpone the application of some business rules and postpone the application of some business rules and reporting, due diligence reporting rules for businesses, as well as to have input tariffs which are more adequate, so that those businesses in Europe which are still consolidating themselves can be protected. So these issues, as well as other issues we're carrying out together, should impose us to be in line with our citizens. In Europe, our businesses support millions of jobs. Europe should give less moralistic and act more. I am proud of our businesses, and I'd like to support them. I don't want to create any obstacles to them. Our principle is ultimately very simple. Wherever we can simplify, we should do that. Wherever we should rectify our work and adapt ourselves to new realities, we should do that. That's the direction we're heading to. And the same applies to the reinforcement of our single market in the sector of energy, banking services, capital markets, telecommunications, and defense. Only in this way can we bridge the technological gap between the United States and China. So a deeper integration could support it. This would reduce costs. This would increase investments and it would make easier for businesses to act all over Europe. One of the most significant pieces of news recently concerns the trade negotiations between Europe and the US. And I'd like to be very clear on this. There is no alliance which is more solid and no democratic symphony which is more deeper in the current world between that of Europe and the United States. Our companies are fundamentally integrated, as are our lifestyles. The temporary trade agreement is a step forward for our relations with the US and the trust between the two continents. In the European Parliament, we'll make our part. We will examine this proposal carefully to make sure that it works correctly for European citizens and businesses. However, we also have to make this experience into a teaching. We have to look beyond. We have to look for partnerships with Africa, with Latin America, partnerships that may be based with sound and solid investments and trade relations. So this is the message that I'd like to share with everybody. I'm going to say the same next week on the occasion of the G7 meeting in Canada. Europe has never stepped back vis-à-vis contributing global cooperation. And Ukraine is the best example of this. Kiev wouldn't be free without the European support. Peace negotiations wouldn't be possible without the constant efforts made by Europe. And in this respect, I'd like to thank President Meloni and the Italian Foreign Minister Tajani for the decisive contribution Italy has made to defend European values. We have always pushed for peace, real peace, a peace stemming from Ukraine's ability to remain strong. And we have to continue explaining why our support to the Ukraine is so determinate. This is not only altruism. There's an exhibition here that tells us exactly this. This depends on our ability to defend and Europe's aspiration to live free. This is a principle that we will never forget. This is where our pressing insistence on having safety needs comes from. History has taught us that without this, we would only postpone a bigger conflict with even worse consequences. So definitely, yes, we do want peace. We've always wanted peace, but we want a long-lasting peace. So a peace that keeps us all safe, that is based on the principle according to which nothing on Ukraine without the participation of Ukraine, and because of the fact that nothing that concerns Europe can be decided without the presence of Europe, not because we want war, but rather because we want peace. We know very well how essential it is to have citizens' consensus on this, especially today when young generations are more skeptical. That's why we need the European Parliament, in other words, citizens' elected voice. We also need to apply to a younger audience, an audience which is more skeptical, to address Europe's proposal to finish the situation in Gaza, where we have a devastating situation. There are too many innocent victims, hostages who have not yet been released, too many children who are paying the consequences of this conflict. Yesterday, other journalists who were killed. This is intolerable. We want killings to be finished. We want sufferings to finish. We want hostages to be released. We cannot remain indifferent. We owe this to all our future generations to help put an end to this cycle of perpetual war. And this is possible. Dear friends, safety, competitiveness, subsidiarity, simplification, peace. All of this is not just some kind of buzzwords. These are the bricks of the next European chapter. If we want peace, we need to protect it. If we want growth, we need to make it possible. If we want trust, we need to earn it. And if we are to be a leader, then we need to change with smarter laws, with more consistent policies, and with the courage of acting. The European Parliament has always been clear and consistent in defending peace, human dignity, and the central role of the individual. And this, I'm saying this as a Catholic, as a profound fan of Europe, as a daughter of the Mediterranean and as a European daughter. Thank you very much. Long live Italy and long live Europe.
Grazie di cuore.
Thank you very much, President. So I link up with your last remark. So your passion for Europe, you express it always with intelligence. Where does it come from? From my parents. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity to let me speak with you also more informally. I grew up in a country that was not a member of the EU until more or less 20 years ago. And as I was a student, I realized that if I didn't do anything, nobody else around me would have done something to fight for something that was considered as not natural, because there was a lot of opposition. But the European Union means sitting around the table and making decisions for the citizens, for the students, for the young people. And that's the dream that we had. We won the campaign. Well, we led the campaign and then we won and we entered. And that's why we are here today. And I come from a southern country, and we are always encouraged towards very active political activities. So it's not easy. It's not easy, I mean, to gain the support of people, but it's worth doing, even if sometimes things look distant for people. Well, so you entered the European Parliament thanks to your passion, and President Mattarella said that the Parliament, the European Parliament, is the center of gravity. And all the things that you mentioned, and so the new pieces of legislation that you would like to adopt in the future, and the topics that you mentioned, well, considering the dynamics between the European institutions, will somehow include a higher weight of the Parliament. If we look at the data of the Parliament elections, well, we see clearly that the citizens want the Parliament to be more active. They want a more active Europe, and especially they want Europe to simplify their lives, creating more opportunities, facilitating their lives. So if we acknowledge that and keep sight of that, especially when we maybe keep discussing on the minor pieces of legislation, then, I mean, we will be more effective. Otherwise, we won't be. Well, this is the major task of the European Parliament, and this is our responsibility to be as ambitious as possible. When Russia invaded Ukraine, 1 week after, we had decided almost unanimously to state that Ukraine has to become an EU member. Maybe in the past, some said, well, when it comes to foreign policy, well, it can't be a role, but the citizens asked us to take a different stance, and we did it. And 2 months after that point in time, all the governments, all the countries unanimously decided the same and went down the same path. So if we decide to dare and go forward with more ambition and more courage, I think we can make it. It's not easy at all. Not at all. The Parliament has changed so much since my arrival 12 years ago. Well, now things have changed. But if I look at my colleagues, for instance, if I look at the colleagues who are here today, they work together every day, even if they come from different political groups. And I mean, I think that we can make it because all countries are well represented in the Parliament. You mentioned something that is very, very critical. The fact that Europe should speak with one voice, should be a leader, not a follower, should be one of the main players on the international scenario, so should not be an observer or a spectator. Well, in this context, the unity of Europe is key. Over the last few months, we heard too many voices speaking. Well, do you think that Europe can be, more united in speaking at international level? Well, you mentioned Roberta, and actually Europe stemmed from a crisis, and every time we're faced with a new crisis, well, that's exactly the moment that will put us to the test and see if we can make it or not. If we understood one thing over the years is that the greatest thing that we can do to prove a Eurosceptical right is to show them that we're not able to agree. So we need to prove them wrong. And it is up to us, citizens, entrusted us with the task, improving their lives, making their lives easier. We need tenacity, courage. We need to overcome difficulties. And I know already that we will go through difficult times, but the decision is up to us. Well, the easiest thing would be do nothing and say it's not it's not us, you cannot put the blame on us. Instead, we have been elected to make decisions, so we have to do our job. We need to fulfill that task. And when I do not see consistency, I'm the first who is not happy. I don't want to go back to my citizens, to my fellow citizens and say, oh, well, I will try to do better next time during the next term. No, we can't afford losing time any longer. Well, so it is really important to act now, because it is now that we need to show that we can be united. And we already did it last week during the meeting with President Trump and President Zelensky. So we were so consistent and united. But now the challenges will be more and more, and we need to keep strong in this sense and keep united. The dialogue between the Commission and the Parliament has improved over the last few years or not? Or do you think that much remains to be done? So you mean that it was not that good if you say that improved? Well, our lawmaking responsibility is clear. We also have a government's responsibility. So we vote to the Commission, we define the guidelines for the Commission, and we need maybe to make clearer use of our powers. But if we look at the questions on journalist protection, I worked a lot on that, especially during the previous term. I wanted a law protecting journalists and the freedom of media in Europe, and we did it because the Parliament decided to support this attitude. And the European Parliament has always tried its best to improve the EU citizens' lives. And, if we think that we go too fast, we need somehow to brake and slow down. But certainly, over the next few months and years, we will have growing discussions about the budget, and especially for the next 7-year period of financial programming. So we will need to define new priorities. We will need to decide what to do with our agricultural policies, what to do for businessmen and companies. We need also to remember those who feel marginalized and forgotten. This is our priority. But, well, if the other institutions won't share the same vision, we will fight strongly to reach common ground. Thank you. We hope that you will succeed. Thank you very much, Mrs. President. Thank you. Thank you very much for the courage that you showed, also your last answer, and for being so far-sighted in designing the future, your willingness to cooperate also with the members of the parliament who are here also. And thanks for speaking Italian.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo
Proporre con la propria vita
esiste anche grazie a te.